Welcome to episode 6 of What Can We Learn From? Today, talking about Brian May. Hello, this is David. If you've never seen an episode of What Can We Learn From? This is what it's not about. It's not about learning licks note per note from the covered artist. It's not about learning songs. It's not about learning riffs. It's all about active listening. We're gonna go through different short samples from Brian May with Queen, and we're going to try to extract concepts and ideas that we can use in our own playing. Because music is a language, and language is used to communicate ideas and tell stories, and it's all about your personal story, not someone else's story. So we're gonna listen to these samples and try to apply some ideas into our own musical stories. Okay, let's get started with sample number 1. Why is that in there? It's so good. That's why it's in there. You knew that I was going to include this. Iconic. Why is it iconic though? Is it because it's been heard so many times? No. As soon as this came out, Bohemian Rhapsody, on the album A Night at the Opera, it was released in 1975. 75, 2 years before I was born. That's insane. Still today, it's very relevant. The reason this is such an iconic song, and these few notes of the solo, the reason they stand out so much is because they're so melodic. If you listen to the track without the solo, and you were to compose something, the most natural thing that would come out is probably something very similar to that. Most of Brian's solo have a vocal quality, not just in the tone. That's actually an aspect that is very vocal driven with a lot of mids. It really stands out. But the melodic idea itself is very vocal driven. It's something you could sing, and it's something that comes out very naturally. If we looked at the sheet paper, we would see that the backing track, the line is going down. It's kind of this movement. Ba, ba, ba. Whereas Brian's lead is doing the opposite. Ba, ba, da, ba, 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 over ba, ba, ba. So that kind of movement always works. You can listen to some of your favorite melodic songs, whether they're guitar driven or not, and you'll oftentimes see this. You're probably not going to see the same exact movement going on. It's something, classical music does it a lot. You will have counter movements like that. That's what's happening here. Now, with that in mind, listen to this with 2 filters. The backing track, you'll see that movement, and Brian's lead. And the lead is going up. It's incredible. It's so melodic. So what do we apply of this? Well, we can apply that counterpoint type of thing, like the opposite direction when we're practicing something, when we're trying to develop a lead, and also try to, and I do it all the time, just put your guitar down. I'm pretty convinced that when Brian was working on this, he probably, maybe he had his guitar in his hand, but he probably sang that over the track and tried to come up with something interesting. Well, let's give that a try. I have a mock-up backing track here. I'm first going to play what Brian is playing and pay attention to the ascending melodic line that Brian is doing. So we have those 3 ascending notes over the descending notes of the backing track. We're going to try to apply that concept and make our own in the style of Brian May thing. Again, without the guitar, I'm going to put it down, and we're just going to try to sing an ascending line over this. Maybe that works. So let's find these notes on the fretboard. Ascending notes. I'm on the 3rd string here, frets 2, 4, 6. And then I'm going to try to embellish that with, I'm not sure exactly. We'll see what happens. But as long as I have this ascending movement over the descending backing tracks. Yeah, maybe something like that. And I would encourage you to download the backing track and just try those opposite lines, opposite directions to create something super melodic, and really start with your voice. Okay, Enough of that. I have another sample here, very different, but very characteristic of Brian, and we can learn quite a bit from it. We need to reposition first. Okay, the reason I'm including this from the same song later on in the song is that the riff is different from what a guitar player would come up with just with his instrument, you know, riffing around. There are only single notes in there, and that's a little strange. If it's not strange in the context of the song, but it's a little strange for a guitar player to riff around without any power chords, without only maybe open strings, without any sense of chords at all. These are just single lines. We have a right and left to add depth, but just a single line going on. I think the reason is that this riff and most of the parts that we're going to listen to today were not just created by jamming on the guitar and trying to make a song out of it. I think it was the opposite. I think the song was there, even if it was not completely recorded, but the end result was always the song, and whatever Brian is playing is serving the song. I think if you had a lot of guitaristic things that are going on, it would be very noticeable. You know, a lot of, again, chords, power chords, things like that. That's not the case here. I think the end result was really that song. If I play that riff without the backing track, it sounds a little off in a way, right? It's not the kind of thing that you would pick up the guitar and play at a Guitar Center or something like that. It's missing everything else. And if you isolate every sample that we're going to listen to today, something is missing. And that's the awesome thing about these guys, Brian in particular here, is that they really served the song. That was the end result. Layers, tons of layers in their music. Isolate one thing outside, it doesn't make much sense, but it's part of the bigger picture. And that's why I included this sample here. Okay, let's check out sample number 3. It's from the song Don't Stop Me Now. The album is Jazz. It was released in 1978, I think. Let me check my notes. Yep, 1978. There is something that I love in this. It's very subtle, but it clearly is Brian May. The first note, you can hear that in the first note. And you can hear it a little bit at the end. That first note is a bended note. You can hear it with the vibrato, but you don't hear the ascent of the bend. You don't hear boom, you hear bow with some vibrato, and it's clearly a bended note, and that gives it a very interesting, again, vocal quality effect. In here, at the end, the ba-ba-ba-bum, that's a bended note too. And that makes a big difference, because instead of just playing the pitch, in this case, second string, 11th fret, well, Brian is tuned a half step below, I'm not, so that's why I'm doing that on the 11th fret. But instead of playing this, that line, well, I'm bending to the 11th fret from the 10th fret, which means that I need to be pretty precise in my bend. And to adjust the pitch, I'm gonna add a little bit of a vibrato. Now you do hear the bend here, the ascent, but not after. Let's apply this over the backing track. I'm in G major. I'm gonna bend to a note without hearing the ascent of the bend. Let's hear that sample one more time. It just adds such an interesting flavor, and you could miss it if you're not careful, but it really does make a difference, so you should try it. Next sample. The first and the last note there, the bended notes with some vibrato, those really stand out. And in between, there's a lot of trills, which we'll check out in a second, but those, I think, are anchor points. And you'll notice that whenever Brian goes a little faster, a little more finger driven, there's always these anchor points. And it goes with the analogy that I like to see when you have to improvise a solo or play a solo, whether it's improvised or not. I like to see it as a river to be crossed. You got the opening of the solo, you're on one shore, and then you've got to get to the end. And in between, sometimes it's a little stressful and can be a little reckless. Not here, because there are stepping stones. And I think these two notes, wham, wham, that we hear at the beginning and the end of that sample, those are like stepping stones. And in between, there's a lot of kind of improvised, and they are improvised because they're not really written in tempo. If you listen, it still works great. But those anchor points are very, very solid. And I think that's something we can take out of Brian's playing here. If I slow this down, the opening and the end, those anchor points are very locked on the beat, and the rest is a little loose. Right? It's a little loose in between. It's kind of like letting go a little bit. It adds this spontaneity. See, there you go. Every episode needs to have a mispronounced word. That's my French coming out. C'est très spontané. Very spontaneous. Well, anyways, what do we get out of this? Well, we get out the anchor points. So when you're developing a lead and you don't want it to be too written, too set in stone, you still want a little bit of recklessness in there, have some anchor points. And in this case, those bends really stand out. If you can have some anchor points that kind of follow the principles that we covered in the very opening section, opposite directions, opposite movements, melodic movements, then you really have a winning solo. With that in mind, if you listen to Queen's music, you'll have a great recipe to apply those things to your own playing. Okay, next sample. There's a few elements in there that we've covered before. The song is Killer Queen, and we're going way back, 1974. You hear how relevant this still is today? Why? Because of the melody. Melody is always going to be relevant. That's why classical music is still very relevant today. You can sing this. If I just sing it, if you're hearing me in the car, and imagine I have long hair, and I am the typical rock guy, guitar player, and that's what's in my head. That's what's in Brian's head. It's very melodic, it's very simple, it's almost humoristic. It's almost childish in a way, but in a very good way. It goes against what you would think of, the guitar hero type of thing. And that's true for all of Queen's music. It kind of goes against the image that you would have of a rock band, especially today, like where it's a little darker. There's a humor and a light-hearted aspect to Queen's music that is just so enjoyable. It's so cool. Yeah, so a few things. The vocal quality thing, and that seems to be a trend. If you've seen the other episodes, we talked about that vocal thing with the breaths, with the episode on Satriani, Andy Timmons, you hear some of that. Hendrix, I don't know if you've seen that one, but all those guitar guys, there's some vocal quality to it. That's a big lesson to learn. But you hear that bend too. You don't hear the ascend, you just hear the down, the descend. So it's a pre-bend. There's a lot of pre-bends. That down, I love it. It's awesome. There's another section of Killer Queen that I want you to hear. This one. I had to talk about the counterpoint and the harmony. There's several guitar things going on here. And again, 1974, overdubs and harmony and the guitars. The guitar was like, he was really ahead of his time. He was not just using the guitar as, think Led Zeppelin, for example, where the guitar is the rhythm instrument. Yes, there's some lead, but it's one or the other. It's not. He really thought outside of the box. So you have so much going on here. The little elements that we have there, check this out. The stereo, da-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. I don't know, hopefully you're listening to this with headphones, but oh man, it's amazing. It's simple parts. But that also teaches you that when you're recording something, always use your ears. And when you have recorded something, use your ears too. Add some ear candy and add some approach it like a painter. Actually, this just reminds me, it's very similar to, you probably wouldn't see the connection here, very similar to John Mayer. If you haven't seen that episode, we talk about how John Mayer is more of a painter. I think this is a great illustration of how Brian is using his guitar to paint over the song, not take the song as kind of a silver platter on which he's going to play his solo stuff, but really complement it's amazing. Let's hear that one again. It's so good. I love it. Okay, I have one more sample. This is a good one. It reminds me a little of what David Gilmour would do. Those high notes, vibrato, really stands out, but not stand out in a way where that's all you hear. It still complements all the rest. Okay, so you have a little bit of everything here. You have the anchor points that we talked about, the notes that are really locked and really, really important. In between, you have a little bit of letting go from Brian. Right here. A little faster, but a little, it's almost at the edge of super controlled and out of control. If you listen to this again, it's just on the edge. It's not exactly perfect, but it's perfect in its imperfection. Hopefully you're following. This is a great example of how just a few notes, heartfelt notes that go with what's going on in the song, because the song has built up from, and this is The Show Must Go On, by the way, 1991. The song has been building up to this point, and there's this culminating point at the end where everything is almost making sense of the song, and you hear it with the vibratos, Okay, so what do you get out of this? What can you get out of that particular section here? Well, you get out of that section that the song really will serve and influence what you're going to do. You need to have, I think, if you want to apply this lesson, you need to have an external ear to what's going on. You're not just participating to the musical story that's going on, you're also listening to it and you're going to respond to it. And so you need to have, you need to feel what's going on, the emotions going on, and that's going to transpire in your guitar playing with the bends, the vibratos. You need to control these things. You need to know how to do them. But I think that's the fundamental lesson. Through all these samples, all of Queen's music, that's the thread. The guitar serves the song. And that's really what makes Brian really stand out, I think. Queen, the band, take out one guy from the band, it's just different. It's not the same. And I think it's really because they all had that heart to serve this masterpiece, the song itself. There is nothing above the song. There's no musician above the song. It's all serving this thing. If you want to apply these lessons and concepts and ideas we just talked about, there is a free pack made of 5 in the style of Queen backing tracks, custom backing tracks. You can download them for free. The link is below. Check that out. And if you want to catch up on the previous episodes of What Can You Learn From, there is a playlist right here. I'll meet you right there. Watch the videos you haven't seen and gather some new tips and concepts and ideas so that you can tell a better musical story. That's really what it's all about. I'll meet you right here. Download the tracks. Thanks for watching this. I'll see you next time.